And we are live. It's Cribl, a Cribl live stream with Ed and Jackie. It's a great day to to talk about the evils of data debt. Jackie, why don't you give a little intro about yourself? Tell us about yourself.
Good morning. I'm Jackie McGuire. So I am the Senior Market Strategy Manager at Cribl, and I deal mainly with security. So my background is in data science. I was a data scientist for a SIM and did a lot of user and entity behavior analytics and anomaly detection. And I'm also a recovered financial advisor, stockbroker, CEO, CFO. So I've done a bunch of stuff, but primarily interested now in data and how it impacts cybersecurity.
Hey, it's a big deal. My name's Ed Bailey, staff senior technical evangelist at AKA. I talk too much, and that's just what I do. Background, long time admin, own big logging platforms, just been in the weeds, have been there and done that. So just like to share, how you can correct common problems in enterprise, give the admins the support they need in order to make progress. Thrilled to be here today to talk to you. I think that data debt is something that's not addressed nearly enough. It's a huge issue. It's a common issue, and I think people really want to hear what they can do about their ugly data.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely not something that you see in the news all the time. I think that it became pretty prevalent a couple months ago when Twitter's former head of security testified and said that they didn't even know what 80% of their data was. They they hadn't touched it in years and didn't know what it was. So I think that's the first time that data debt's really been put in a general audience spotlight in a while, but it's a really, really important issue. Is data is exploding. Data debt is exploding.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and it's common. I mean, and I'm glad people are finally talking about it. There's too much data. Typically, that data is ugly. It's in a million formats, and it's very difficult for security and operations teams to consume and make sense out of it. Look at the comparison in the analytics space. Analytics space, highly disciplined, people with degrees in like data science who are built very advanced schemas. Things don't change. There's only a few formats and they're able to get a lot of results out of data. But in the operational security space, it's quite the opposite. It's highly volatile data. It's a million different structures. You don't have that same discipline. So it's the struggles of collecting and doing something with that data are enormous.
Yeah, and I think not everybody who works with data is necessarily has a mind to best practices with regard to data retention and storage. And I know as a data scientist, I never really gave much thought to where the data I was I was pulling was going to live, how long it was going to be
Right.
there, what we were going to do with it when we were done. Like it's just not always something that everybody at every level that deals with data thinks about.
Yeah, well said. Retention is another thing. It's so easy to forget about until the auditors come around or there's a big incident and you have to find, hey, we need to look at that data from a year ago and it's just not there. And those are the kind of things that are just they're important parts of the program. And just always think about there's that operational, the security element, and then there's the risk management or the GRC element, and the retention and knowing what's in the data and knowing how the data is formatted are critical aspects of that. And it just does not get enough love.
Yeah, and so
Mhm.
from your perspective, what are some of the common pitfalls with not knowing what's in your data or not having it properly formatted?
So let's talk about it from a formatting standpoint. So you're looking at your common, Elastic, Splunk, things like that. Badly formatted data costs money to consume. You're going to eat up CPU cycles, consuming XML or consuming badly formatted JSON or data that's not even JSON. Don't even get me started on the crapola that vendors call syslog, and then and so all that data consumes cycles. So instead of using those CPU cycles to analyze your data, get value from your data, drive your detections, you're burning up your resources just consuming it. And then you have to normalize it. Think about when you write out a security detection, you're trying to correlate between multiple data sources that are all in different formats. Finding your fields, finding your data points is, the consistency is everything. And then don't even get started on machine learning. Machine learning is the result of consistent, well formatted data. And if your data is all over the place, that's going to be very hard to achieve those kind of insights. Imagine by you're dealing with as a data scientist. Think about if all your data was extremely high volume and it was all different.
Yeah. It gets expensive too. And I think that's, that's not the cost is always your number one concern, but poorly formatted data, especially with a machine learning, from a machine learning perspective, where you might not think an extra couple fields are a big deal or an extra, a couple hundred characters, but when you're talking about thousands to millions of logs and you're having to do pretty intense computation on them, that gets really, really expensive if you're sloppy.
Yeah, it's gonna eat up your CPU, and it's distracting from getting value from the data because you're trying so hard to parse it. From a compliance standpoint, it's a whole 'nother set of issues. It's very easy, so you can easily have contamination where you have, sensitive data, PII, HIPAA, and scope, all in your data and not know it. And then that leaves you open to regulatory issues because when the auditors come around and they will look, they find something, you're in trouble. And then it's gonna be fines and not insignificant fines. GDPR is another good example. You need to know where your data is coming from and what are the controlling authorities around it. And this is why I think that if you're managing telemetry logging for security and operations, you need to have a GRC component to help you out with this because this is an overwhelming set of data points for most teams.
Yeah, in especially in data science and user and behavior analytics and anomaly detection. So when we're talking about security and we're trying to find bad actors or things that are broken, the thing that you look for in a model are what are called features. And so features are like these, the use unique characteristics that identify the data. So things like the username, the IP, and so interestingly, one of the things that dirty data can do is cause what we call false features. So it can cause it to look like there are anomalies in data that actually aren't there because there are anomalies in data formatting or in the presence of data. If a field is there sometimes and not there sometimes, and it can really, really impact your the quality of your detections. And a lot of times, what it ends up resulting in is just tons and tons of false positives because you're detecting anomalies in basically garbage data. And if you fix it, that's okay. But a lot of times it doesn't get fixed, and then analysts just start dismissing all of these alerts that are constantly being thrown, and that's when an actual threat slips in, right? And it's I think we get really desensitized really fast to false positives, and having false features in your data causes false positives.
Yeah, I mean, dirty data in that context, it's devastating. I've seen this happen over and over again. One of my favorite sims that specialize in machine learning, and you see constantly where we have prospects, customers who are getting poor results, and it's because the data it's off just enough that the anomaly detection baselines are off, and you're just not going to get the right results. And even things as little as timestamps. The people looked at me. I would just lose my mind about timestamps and meetings. Looked at me like, "What's wrong with you?" But the thing is, you put data into, like, for example, this is another system. You put I saw a company was putting batch data loads into a tool that didn't read the timestamp, so it treated all that data as if it was on ingest. So once an hour, you saw this big spike in data, but there was no data otherwise. So you can imagine the baselines, how the baseline behavior was totally worthless, and they were wondering why they weren't getting any results.
Yeah.
And so it's just, but I think the question is, this is where is so sure. I've identified this. What do you do about it? I think that's the next thing is let's talk about what is let's say you're a director, you're director of your team, you have Elastic or Splunk under you, and you're responsible for that. What do you do once you identify that you have variable data, it's ugly, and it's not complete? So where do you get started?
Yes, I think for I think my perspective and your perspective are going to be different, right? Because my perspective comes from like what are the outcomes we're looking for with the data. I start there because then you can work backwards with what
Right.
pieces of the data you actually need, and then figuring out how to put processes in place to get the data into the format that you need it in. So when I started as a when I originally started as a data scientist and didn't really understand these things, I would say just collect it all and regex it into something you can do something with. Not a great tactic, believe it or not.
And not
So
the most sustainable thing to do. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But what do you think from your perspective? What do you think are the
Oh,
most critical first
I think
steps?
you're exactly right, where you have to start at the end in order to get started. I think it maybe sounds a little weird, but what is the desired result? And so, like from my past experience, it is going to be regulatory, it's going to be cost management, but it's also going to be generate quality data that's going to give me the best results for my operational and security teams. And so let's talk about so like machine learning, for example. We're going to understand that data that we need to put into our ML tool, and then we're going to work with the data scientists to say what is the ideal way to generate this data, and then we're going to figure out how to do it because you've got to start at the end. If you start at the beginning, you're going to flail around. You need
Yeah.
direction. I think understanding the end result is what gives you that direction.
Yeah. I think also thinking about incident response, so when I'm looking at logs and thinking about, um, if we have some type of compromise, if we need to look at this data, what are the critical pieces of this data for incident response? What are the fields that we don't need, but if we have an incident, we will need? Because then you also get into things like, do we need to just keep a full raw copy of the logs? Is it more efficient to just pull a few fields out that we need for our primary purposes and then keep a raw copy of the logs in a more cost effective object store, so you have that, because that's also, from regulatory perspective or from an incident response perspective, it may be that you actually do need your messy data in, in its entirety, and the easiest way to collect it is just as it is and just dump it somewhere cheap to store. So I think that's also a pretty important thing to look at.
Yeah, well said. And that's why I think it's important to identify all those downstream processes. So incident response. And I think that ability to put your raw copy somewhere solves a lot of problems. It solves your retention, it solves your legal. It also solves that I'm an IR responder and I don't have the right data in my SIM. So I need to go back to my raw data store in order to see, do we not have the data or was it poorly formatted or something else? It gives you I'm a big card player. I believe in outs. You got to
Yeah.
play to the odds where you got to play to the options of, well, here's my out because I always have that raw copy of data just in case. So the thing is, and then once you establish your end goals, that's why that cataloging your processes, identifying your goals, is anyone who's looking to try to do this, don't try to do it all at one time because you will shoot yourself in the head.
Yeah.
You have to have a broad view of this as a process because if you're in a decent sized company, you're probably dealing with 20, 30, 40 different development teams. You're all working in 20, 30 different development frameworks. You're also think about the security tools. You've seen the stats, but 15, 20 security tools easily. They're all
Yeah.
generating logs. They're all doing it a little bit differently. How many, and in a decent size, say 5,000 person company, how many SaaS tools are they also running that you still need to get logs off of? And so those are the just incredibly variable. So the way I look at it is you've got to start then from a standards point of view. Generate standards, minimal standards. So this is another funny story. I like application logging and wrote this just beautiful manifesto, and it was 20 pages long and examples, and got completely ignored. And so I came back with I need it in the right timestamp, and it could be one of 10 formats, and the rest of it I'll take what you give me. But, just but that standards and then buy-in because no leader is gonna get behind something like this without a set of standards to point to, and I think that that's critical. And then you have to then also you gotta identify your data. What's in your data? Where is your data? Where is it coming from? And that's where building that catalog is crucial. What about you? What do you think, Jackie?
Yeah, I think understanding the different regulations that your data is subject to. So understanding how long you actually need to retain the data, and to your point, what's in it. If you have PII in any of the data that you're dealing with, you're in a whole different universe of what you can do with it, where you should be storing it, how long you should keep it. So understanding really kind of what you're dealing with, and also, any regulations you might be subject to that you're not aware of that impact your data. And then, it's funny because I was just thinking about this. Like I watch Hoarders, right? And so
There you
you got
go.
to kind of
All right.
treat this like
Yeah.
you would treat hoarding, right? So like first you got to stop the flow of crap coming in,
Right.
and, and then you have to start creating a plan to deal with the pile of crap that you have that's already been brought in. So
Exactly. I think, and that's where the data scientist is the therapist, and then you have the auditor who is the housing inspector who's going to shut your house down unless you clean up. So,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think, kind of shameless plug for Cribl. I think one of the really powerful tools we have that when I saw it, when I first discovered Cribl, was like, wow, this could actually help with that is
Yes.
replay, right? So Cribl has this amazing tool called replay that'll allow you to pull data out of a place you have it stored and process it, put it into your sim, put it into a different storage, route it the way you normally would. And I think that's important because once you're trying to deal with this mountain, this backlog of data that you have, you're probably not going to pull it all at once because that's going to be really, really, really expensive. And you probably want to prioritize it, whether you need to deal with the oldest stuff first, because that's the most important, or the newest stuff first. And then replay will allow you to process it as if it's happening in real time, right? So then you can actually kind of start dealing with this once you've put your standards in place and you've said, hey, we've got this pipeline built, this is going to process all the data as it comes in. It's a great way to be able to actually run that data through. And then you got to kind of figure out, all right, how many gigs, terabytes, petabytes, whatever that looks like, are we going to do a day? And you can really create kind of a pretty well controlled plan for dealing with it.
Yeah, absolutely can. And that's where it started with the standards. I think one of the things is also in terms of retention, use something like Cribl in order to route your data to object storage, and that gives you that ability to replay. One of the things I really liked about it was, so this is something that you run into all the time, where you have someone from legal and also from security says you can't do any of the data. We have to have a forensic copy just in case we have to submit this to legal. Now you ask, how many times have you sent to the FBI? Oh, we've never done it, but we're going to spend millions of dollars preparing for something we've never done. That's another discussion. But the thing I liked about having Cribl is when someone comes to you with a demand like this, you can say, sure, it's your S3 bucket, you pay for it. We're going to send you a copy of raw data that's not particularly useful. And so then we're going to put, maybe have another that's your retention copy. And so you have that ability, just like Jackie mentioned, to normalize, clean up that data, reformat it, put it into your S3 bucket. So then you can pull it. So you're not forced to put all of your data into your SIM. Putting all of your data into SIM is going to drive, it's a cost, it's a massive cost issue, but also it's a results issue. Noise in your SIM is not helpful. It's not going to give you what you need. You have to have better data, not more data. You have to have the right data, not more data. And I think that's so important to drive toward that. Then use your object storage with replay, or generate a data lake, and then use that as a way to power your analytics at a reasonable cost. And I think splitting these capabilities is incredibly important, because it's just, don't see SIM products that are going to give you that quality data lake at an affordable cost. And so
Yeah.
and it's a big deal. I mean, think about it from an IR team. How many times as an IR responder is your Splunk admin saying you got to stop running that query for the last year because you're killing our resources? But by splitting it out into the data lake, it makes things so much easier, where you want to run that query and blow up your data lake. That's great, because you're not impacting your detections. And so
Yeah.
it just gives you the right mix of capabilities. And I think that strategic change helps, and it helps just give you more options. So while you're curing your data debt issues, and by the way, this is going to take a couple of years. This is not something that's going to turn on a dime. Development teams aren't going to just make changes. Now, so what about, I think the thing what's your experience working with development teams when there's an issue with alignment? Typically, I don't find development teams are incentivized the way, say, the Splunk team is about data formats. What's your advice about how do you get development teams to shift what they're doing with logging in order to produce the right results?
Yeah, I mean, I think as with most things security related, it's really about helping people understand the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve, and what the worst case scenarios are, what can go wrong, what the actual ripple effects of, because poorly formatted data, it seems like it's not a big deal on the surface, right? It's like, all right, just reformat it. But there are a lot of points in the process that poorly formatted data can either break or can really slow down. And some of those are during incident response and other critical failures, where that slowdown can mean the difference between catastrophic and contained, right? So I think security has to be a culture, and it has to be a culture throughout an entire organization where everybody understands that Nobody on a security team wants you to do things just because, or because they enjoy managing an extra process or an extra
Mhm.
standard. It's virtually everything in a security program is there for a reason. So I think really being honest with development teams about the reason that standards are in place, the reason that data formats need to be where they are, because I think that's the there's a lot of assumptions between technical teams a lot of times that everybody understands issues from everybody else's point of view and why they're important. And of course, it's obvious why we would want to do this, but sometimes saying the thing that's obvious can mean the difference between people being on the same page or not.
I think the communication aspect and the message that we're all in it together is really important. And I think, for example, also is just having consolidated and standard application logs gives security visibility and also helps support teams provide better application support, better options for the SOC. And I think that's just so important. And then you combine that with your standards-based approach. I mean, have you ever used a GRC process in order to help with this as well?
I have not, but
Mhm.
I I
Mhm.
know that it's highly recommended, and I think that's what you recommend, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this gives when you're, the director of enterprise logging or something like that, it's very hard for you to reach across the enterprise and help motivate people to follow standards and also get visibility because it's one thing that when you're trying to work across all these different verticals, you spend an enormous amount of emotional injury trying to get people to do the right thing. I think it's important. You want to work with people, you want to communicate, but it's also important the use the power of the audit teams for your purpose too, because they're coming down on your head. But you know what? Work with them. You have a set of approved standards. Ask them to open up your findings, present those findings in the monthly GRC report, and it's amazing how slides with red boxes saying non-compliant can get people motivated. And
Yeah,
and it's just that visibility I think is crucial. But use these processes for your use these processes for good, and that
yeah,
where you can get things done and take some of that because it's frustrating. It is enormously frustrating when you're trying to get someone to do something, and they're very clear that we are incentivized on delivering features. We are incentivized on fixing bugs. We are not incentivized on this. And
yeah.
so you're gonna bang your head in the wall till your head falls off. So use your tools, that are around you for these purposes.
Yeah, I was somewhat shocked coming into security at the lack of kind of compliance standards outside high risk industries because I came from Wall Street and I worked for Fidelity on Wall Street, which is one of the most conservative from a compliance perspective brokers that exists. It's like, whatever the most conservative way to interpret this regulation is, that's what we're doing. And it's great because it saved us during the financial crisis. We came out far better than most of our peers. But when I got into tech and it's just like the wild west, and it's
Right.
like unless you're a highly regulated industry, dealing with HIPAA or PII, some type of PII, it's there really aren't great standards. And I think we're starting to move in that direction. But the reality is regulators and legislators are just not as well versed in technology as they should be, given how critical it is to our entire world now. And I think that's an ask that we as an industry need to continue to make. Is we do need better standards and better compliance frameworks because. To your point, it's not easy to always be the bad guy out here trying to get people to do the right thing without, something to point at to back you up.
Right. And that's why I think it's important when you're working in these fields, help people understand how better data not only helps the enterprise, but it helps the teams. They can have better results, better data, solve problems faster. And it's just because there is a clear correlation between better data and better results.
Yeah,
Not to mention, let's talk about budget, but those things are all there. So,
yeah.
any other advice you want to share about data debt, how to handle it? Anything else you want? Just imagine you're out there, you're struggling with this. What would you want to hear? You a few years ago when you're struggling with this to help.
Yeah. You don't have to eat the apple whole.
Yep.
You don't have to eat the apple whole. So
Right.
the
I
step
love that.
1
That's great.
yeah, step 1 is stop garbage from coming in, and then yeah, because I think that's what can be paralyzing is if you are like, we have like petabytes of data that we are sitting on that we don't, like I have the same issue with pictures in my phone and so the answer is, the first step is stop what's coming in and put some standards in place to clean things up, and then just take it step by step and understand that any progress is progress, and it's okay if it happens in fits and starts, because this is a rapidly evolving thing, and so everybody has this problem. You're not alone. It's not a dirty little secret. Everybody has this issue, from the largest to smallest companies, and just one bite at a time.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And that's where getting buy-in, I think, is incredibly important. Don't try to do this yourself. You may have the best, brightest personality, but trying to work across a decent sized enterprise and get these things done is just you will kill yourself. Get buy-in from your leaders, but it's important. Have standards, have a plan, have a strategy, and you will be surprised how leaders will buy into this because they know it's a problem. They don't know what to do about it. And so
Yeah,
when they see someone out there with a plan, then they are more than likely they're going to say, "This is great. Let's do this." And
yeah,
talk about the value to the enterprise, the value to the teams, sell those value points. Talk about the cost management, also the clear relationship of better data, better results. It's not only security, that's operations too. And also take a long view with this, set expectations of this ship is not going to turn quickly, but also be ready to say, hey, we have 800 data sources and our goal is, corrective action on 5, 6, 7 a week, and that
mm,
you're keeping it moving. And also
yeah.
make friends with your auditors. Use the auditors to help you too.
Yeah. I don't know that I don't know that make friends with your auditors is ever a piece of advice I would give, but you're a nicer person than I am. So no,
Hey,
I'm just kidding. No,
auditors,
I
yeah,
actually 100% agree. I
yeah,
100% agree. If you have a good relationship there, they can actually help you push things along that wouldn't otherwise move. So I think
yeah.
that's a
It's
great.
very underrated lever.
Yeah.
Mhm. Very, very cool. Hey, just a couple of quick things. Join the Cribl community, cribl.io/community. Join our, we have Slack communities, 5,000 strong. Great group of people who always want to talk, not just logging. Get yourself an observability pipeline. Cribl is a great Cribl Stream, great option. The downloadable option is free, 1 terabyte a day. We also have a cloud. We have on-prem enterprise options as well. So very powerful solutions. Take a look at Cribl Edge, Cribl Search. Cribl Search just frees up your data, make that data lake work for you. Jackie, so are you getting ready to do an event?
Yeah, I am doing a lot of events actually. So I will be speaking at Initech in Dallas tomorrow, and next week is RSA, which is super exciting. So next week, my good friend Zach Rayburn and I will be putting on a workshop to help people build a Docker-based threat intelligence pipeline at the Dark Arts Village at RSA. So it's going to be a happy hour too. So that'll be really fun. You can check out our website. We have all the details on all of the events we're going to be at. But would love to see anybody there. Come say hi.
Nice. I'm going to be in Columbus, Ohio on Thursday and Friday. I'm going to be giving a talk on Friday at the Columbus Information Security Summit. Looking forward to it. It's one of my favorite events of the year. And then I'll be at RSA with Jackie next week. So looking forward to it. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, all the
Hey,
swag.
that's right. Bags and bags of swag. I mean, I had like 400 or 500 vendors, so it's going to be something else.
Yeah.
Yep. Hey, but I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your shared wisdom. It's going to be great. Hey, also, if y'all need help, we're both active on social media. Look for us on Twitter. The community Slack is great. Also through LinkedIn. We're here to help you. So I want to
Yeah.
thank you, Jackie. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Have a great day, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Take care.